So welcome to the formulize tutorials. This video will walk you through the process of downloading and installing the standalone version of formulize if you haven't done that yourself already. So you can always get formulize, as you probably know, through the Freeform Solutions website. There's a formulize section and then downloads and docs. That will take you to this page here, and you can get the standalone version from this link, or in the future, maybe slightly different, but that's what you're looking for, is the standalone version. The standalone version will, it has an installer, and it will just run and install everything that it needs for you to use it. You can also use formulize and separately as part of an existing Impress CMS or Zoop's website if you have one, and that's what you're looking for. But this tutorial will walk you through the process of setting up formulize from scratch with the standalone version. So once you've downloaded the file, there's a few files and folders in it, and inside the htdocs folder of the zip file you should find a whole bunch of files and folders that look just like this. What you want to do is you want to take those and copy them or upload them to your web server, to a folder there where you want your formulize system to exist. So what I've done is I've set up a web server on my computer here that I can use, so it's not actually out there on the internet. It's just a local copy that I can play with. I'll show you in a minute how I've done that. But basically I've just created a folder called F4 tutorial, and that's where I want to put the files. So I will just grab them all and copy and go to the folder I've created for them and put them right there. So that'll take a minute or two to do that. And while that's happening, I can show you the server that I've set up locally. If you want to do this just to try it out and test it, but not but don't have a full website set up for it yet, or don't want to do that yet, then you can use various local servers. There's XAMPP is a well-known one. There's WAMP for Windows. I like this one for Windows, Vertrigo Serve. And if you download it from the Vertrigo Serve website, vertrigosourceforge.net, then then you install it and you get some software that will run up in your system tray here, and it'll give you a little menu just like it shows on their page. And you can access all the server settings and logs and so on that you need to. One thing you might want to change if you do set this up is the memory limit. You can access it there through the settings, component settings, and I've set this pretty high at 256 M. You want to pick a number, 64 M, 128 M, typically multiples of 8 by convention, and that will just give you more than enough space to work with for PHP. It's important to note this isn't reserving that memory for PHP. Other applications can still use it. It's just that if the PHP process meets or exceeds that amount of memory, then it will stop. It's basically a backstop against one PHP process taking over all the memory of the entire server, that's all. So it's generally not a problem to up it a bit, certainly not on a local server. Got other considerations if you're running a regular web server. You may not even have access to this setting on a full-blown web server. So anyway, once you've made that change and any others you might want to make, you can click Save and Restart. It will just do its thing and be back and running up there in the corner. So with that installed, then what you get is a little mini control panel at the address of your local computer. 127.0.01 is the local host address, or the address of your own computer. If you type that into a web browser, you will get whatever your own computer is trying to serve to you. Normally that will be nothing, but once you have a server like Vertrigo installed, it will serve up whatever is in the root of its web space. And Vertrigo provides you with a sort of quasi control panel here. Something else that is something that I like to do, whether you're doing this locally or on a web server, something I like to do first is always create the database. The installer will potentially create the database for you. It could do that, but well, it depends on how your server is set up and a few other things. So just to be completely sort of as safe and basic as possible, I'd like to set up the database first. On your own web server, if you're using that, you will probably have control panel software like cPanel or Plesk or something else, and there are ways in that software that you would go and create a new database. In Vertrigo, if you're doing it locally, you would click on the phpMyAdmin link here, just at the root address of your computer. So if we click on that, it's going to ask us for a username and password. The Vertrigo README will tell you what all the usernames and passwords are. The default is root and Vertrigo. So there it is. I'm into phpMyAdmin, which is the software for managing the databases. As you can see, I've set up a few here for various testing purposes and other things at Freeform before. So I'll just create one called F4 tutorial. There it is. And that's pretty much it. You just create the new database, don't have to do any other settings, and there we go. We've got one. It's got no tables. We're ready to go. The exact process for doing that on your own server may be slightly different too. Well, hopefully don't have to contact your tech support for the server, but if it's particularly odd or confusing, or if they have it really locked down, then you might need the assistance of someone else. Once the database is created or in place, then basically you're ready to run the install process. So if your files have all copied into the right place, in my case this F4 tutorial folder, which I just have, this is my path to my local Vertrigo system. www is the web root folder where all the so-called web files are. It's not on the web, it's local, but that's where everything that I want to access with Vertrigo, I put it in here. I've created a folder called F4 tutorial. I copied all my files in there. We have created the database, so we're ready to go to the next step, which is, well, actually running the installer. So to do that, you just go to the address where you have put the files. So in our case, in my case here, it was the local host address, this computer, / F4 tutorial, because that was the name of the folder. The folder name here, F4 tutorial, is where I put all the files. So we can just type that in and press enter, and there we go. We're at the first page of the installation process. It'll walk you through a few steps here. After that, you'll have a full-blown working formulize system. So languages, only one language actually out of the box. There are alternative language packages for the Impress CMS software, which is an underlying component of the standalone version of formulize. But for formulize itself, really, there's an incomplete French translation, there's a more incomplete Portuguese translation, and well, stick with English for now, I would recommend. So clicking next, then we get the introduction, explanation of what we're doing here, some requirements you need on your server. The installer will check a bunch of these things for you. Some other steps that you need to do: set up your web server, PHP and database. Yep. In my case here, it's Vertrigo. You may have a web server elsewhere. Prepare a database for Impress CMS. Yeah, we did this already. That was the phpMyAdmin stuff that we did just a moment ago. Create a user account and grant this user access to the database. So that's the root and Vertrigo username and password for the local version. If you're creating this on your own web server, you would have created a username and password at the time you made the database, so you'll need to remember what those are. Make the directories, uploads, cache, template C, modules, all writable. On a local Windows server like I've got here, that's not necessary because it's all writable by default. But certainly if you're running a regular Linux server, or well, any server on the web for real, you want to make sure that you've adjusted the permissions on these properly, because by default things should not be writable, but those particular folders do need to be writable. There's also a file called main file PHP in the root of the system. I can show you where that is right here. So just in the main folder, there's a file called main file PHP. You want to make sure that is writable as well for the installer, but it doesn't. It shouldn't be writable after the installation. When the installation is done, you want to set that back to read only. And also it says you'll want cookies and JavaScript running, and well, if you don't, most of the web these days will be broken for you, so presumably you do have those turned on. So with all of that set up, click Next, and here we are. It's checking that we have a bunch of the settings that we needed, and a few other optional things that we also do have, so that's all fine. If there's a problem there, then it's going to be something with your basic server setup that well, you'll have to consult with someone who knows your server setup to be able to change whatever those settings are. So on to the next page. Well, we set up the various locations. So it's detected that the web address for this website is going to be our localhost address /f4 tutorial, the folder where all the files reside. That'll be different in your case, but it should have automatically detected that. It's probably automatically detected the correct physical path as well. This is the location of the files on the computer, not the web address. So in my case, as a local setup here, it's on the G drive, the Vertrigo folder, the web root, and then the folder that I put all the files in, and that's totally correct. And then there's the trust path. Now the trust path is a security precaution that it's a place where a whole bunch of information that is well, unique to your installation and is highly sensitive, like your database password. The trust path is where that information is going to go. Normally it's outside the web root where all the web accessible folders are. So you can see www is the web root, but it wants to put the trust path outside of that. That's a good security precaution, but depending on your server setup, that might not be possible. So you'll have to figure out what locations are available to you. You may have to manually create this folder and then type the path into this box. It really depends on your server setup what the best way to do this is. But the bottom line is there needs to be some physical path to a folder here, and you need to have that folder existing on your server, and then then there's no problem. It's just a question of where that folder should be and what it should be named. Now if you have, I'm on a local Windows server, again full write permissions to all the folders, so I can actually just click create trust path and the installer will try to create it for me, and surprise, Windows lets it do that, so no problems there. In your case, the installer may not be able to create the folder that it wants, and as I say, you might have to go and create the folder yourself, type in the name here. So that's one area that can be a bit tricky for people, but otherwise the whole installer is generally pretty straightforward. It's important that the trust path location be as secure as possible, because it does contain sensitive information. That's why it's done this way and a little differently from some of the other settings. So once that's all done and correct in the folders, the trust path exists and the other paths are correct, carry on, and it's going to ask about the database. So database is going to be on localhost. The only reason that would be different is if you have some web server configuration where the database is not on the same computer as Apache itself or as whatever web server you're using. If you have a complex setup like that, I assume you know what you're doing. You're probably not even watching this video. So I'll just stick with localhost because that's correct in my case and in most cases. Username root, password Vertrigo. You'd use whatever username and password you created when you set up your database. We don't really have to use a persistent connection. That's a more advanced setting. Normally it's turned off. So that's fine. We click next and ask for the name of the database. We want F4 tutorial. So there we go. It's got a bunch of other things it's pre-selected here for you. Generally you can leave them as is. Sometimes people might want to change these last two, but the character set and the collation, if you know you're using multi-byte characters, Chinese, Japanese, something non-Western. But for the most part, UTF-8 will work for most people. And well, since there's not a multi-byte translation of formulize, it's possibly a non-issue for most people. So, assuming you've put in the correct name of the database based on whatever you created, you can click the button here. This is the part where if the database doesn't exist, the installer will try to create it for you. And if you know that that your web server setup will let you do that, you don't have to go to phpMyAdmin like we did in the beginning and create the database there as a separate step. You could just type in the name here, and assuming your username and password that you've typed in previously are correct and then have permission to create databases, then it'll try to do this for you. But I like to, just as a sort of standard, basic, always guaranteed to work approach, I like to create the database first myself. So click next. It finds all that information to be correct, and it's going to now start putting information into that main file PHP, the file that we had to make writable in the beginning. So we say yes, go ahead and do that. Now it wants to put in information into the database tables, so we say yes, do that. So there it goes, it fills up all those tables. Now it wants to create the admin account. Since this is basically just a sandbox that we're setting up here, I'm just going to use admin all over the place, but you would want to use secure passwords and real account names and email addresses if you were setting this up for real on a website. So with that out of the way, we're now going to put it's created the tables before, now it's going to put all the information into the tables. So here it goes, and done. And then move on to the next step, and it's going to install the modules. Technically, formulize is a module of the underlying Impress CMS system in this case. It's also totally equally compatible with Zoops, and here there's some modules in our standalone formulize installer that need to be set up, including formulize itself. So we will click next and let it do that. This takes a little bit longer than some other steps because there's actually a lot of information that's being churned over here as it sets up all these different pieces. But there it goes, it's done now. It tells you all the things that it's installed and set up, but you really don't need to worry about all that. And then, well, then we're done. So click next and it says installation complete. There's the formulize homepage if you want to get support. Other information about Impress CMS, which is part of the software that's been installed here. And we're ready to go to the homepage. And that is right there. So if we log in with the username and password you created, then away we go. You have a completely installed but empty formulize standalone installation now. Congratulations. There are no forms available, but we can go into admin and start setting things up, which we will do in future videos. Now, as a precaution, there's a few things you want to do as cleanup after the installation. One is, of course, make sure main file is not writable. You want to make sure it's read-only, and just also it's deleted the install folder for us. If for some reason it hasn't deleted the install folder, you should delete the install folder now. There is also one change that you want to make in formulize. The export folder here under modules formulize export, you want to make sure this folder is writable. If the server is going to create any spreadsheets as you download data in the future, that folder needs to be writable. That's about it. So if there's anything else, well, you can look in other videos and learn lots more. Thanks for watching. Hope this helped.